It's time to go over to the USA. Waiting there for us is dog expert Jeff Morgan. He's the author of Happy Dog 101, 101 plus 1 tips for raising a happy dog. Good afternoon to you, Jeff.
Hey, Richard. Good afternoon to you and to everybody that's listening.
Last week, I was speaking with Leah on the Weird News, and I said to her that I thought it is very bad to give a chicken bone, after you eat some chicken or you eat something and there's a bone left and you give it to your dog. It's not good for the dog. Is that correct or not?
That's absolutely correct, and it can be a very dangerous thing to do. A lot of times dogs will get scraps from the table and there might be a chicken bone in there or something, but some bones are more fragile than other bones, softer than other bones, break apart and splinter. And so we really have to be careful when we're giving our dogs bones and human food especially, because there are some things that are dangerous for a dog that are not dangerous for the owner. And so
like what?
Bones in general.
Yeah.
But yeah, bones in general, I just say no.
But I mean, if you, we give our dogs leftover rice, for instance, or potato or whatever. Is that bad for them?
Not necessarily, as long as it's not seasoned very well. If it's pretty plain the way that it is, doesn't have too much seasoning, then it's fine. Because sometimes when dogs are suffering through digestive disorders or something, a veterinarian will recommend rice and fish or rice and chicken for the dog to be able to get back to balance. So it's good. But go online and look for things that are dangerous for dogs to eat. Things that people usually know of, like milk and chocolate, can be very harmful to the dog's digestive system. And then there are things that can actually be fatal, like avocado seeds, pits, grapes. People wouldn't think about it. People might be throwing grapes to their dog on a regular basis because it's a cute little snack, but grapes can be pretty dangerous to a dog. So just go online and look for different foods that are dangerous for dogs.
Wow, that's interesting. Okay, what subject do you want to talk about today?
Wild Thing.
Wild Thing. That was a big song for the Trogs in the 1960s.
Yes, that's right. That came out before I came out, but I do remember that song very well.
Yeah, it came out before I came out as well. I must tell the listeners, I'm not that old.
Right. Well, modern day dogs are bred to be more and more domestic over the years. And people know what the idea of domestic means, but the definition of domestic really is adaptation to intimate association with human beings.
Okay, explain that. Those hard words in there.
Yeah, well, so domestic basically means that dogs can adapt to being in close quarters with humans and live with humans. So basically, dogs these days, and over the past many, many years, dogs have been bred through and through to get along better and better and better with living with human beings. But knowing this isn't enough to ensure that your dog will behave domestically in your home and adapt to your conditions. Most people think that because dogs are domestic and not wild, that they're going to respect the house, they're not going to pee and poo in the house, they're not going to hunt, they're not going to do things that are considered wild. But the rest of the domestication process is up to us. The breeders do their thing, but the rest is up to us. So for many years, I've been studying why is it that so many dogs behave in a wild way or feral way in homes. Scent marking, guarding territory, food aggression, hunting, males fighting with other males, whatever. Why do so many dogs behave in a wild fashion at home, and why do I have so much work, really? Because I do have a lot of work to do, a lot of clients. And one of the most important insights I've discovered in this whole process is that dogs in the wild are free to roam, free to migrate, free to hunt, free to mate, free to scent mark and guard territory, and so on. And they actually have to behave that way in the wild. And dogs in the wild are free to do those things. A dog that has spent too much time on the street or in the wild is often a really difficult dog to domesticate or to bring into the home and kind of break of its bad habits. So when people give their dog freedom to roam the house, come and go as they please, eat whenever they want, you can be sure to expect wild behavior.
Okay.
So but most people do that. They'll get a new dog and then they bring the dog in and expect the dog to respect the home. And it doesn't often work out that way. They give the dog the freedom to roam from room to room, come and go as they please, eat whenever they want. So you can expect some wild behavior when that happens. And I'm not saying wild like the dog's going crazy. I'm just saying more wild, instinctual, natural behavior.
I don't know.
So,
it's like with children, you have to set the borders at the very beginning.
yes, and people understand that as a concept, but sometimes it's very difficult for people to implement. So when you impose restrictions upon your dog by, say, not allowing it to roam the house freely, feeding it at a specific schedule, having it sit, move away from you and stay, or move away from you, sit and stay before it gets fed, putting it in a smaller space before you leave the house, or crate training your dog, and imposing restrictions around the dog when you're home and when you're not at home. So when you're home, it's more of an energetic restriction. You're there, you're supervising, you're watching. The dog walks into another room, you say no, and you bring the dog back. Now, some people don't care about that. The dog walks from room to room. What's the big deal? The big deal is how your dog feels in your environment, not necessarily what it does, how it feels. So if your dog feels free to roam, chances are you're going to see things you don't like. He's going to pick through the garbage. He's going to pee in your bedroom on the carpet, or he's going to be territorial at the front door, things like that. So it's the feeling of restriction that finalizes the domestication process. So, when I say restriction, doesn't mean you're making your dog fearful. It just means that you're putting a feeling around your dog that it knows it's got eyes on it. So it doesn't mean we don't pet the dog and we're not loving to the dog, and we have to be that way. But it really means that when we're not actually engaging the dog in specific behaviors, feeding, walking, petting, playing, wrestling, whatever, that the dog should feel restricted in its spot, by you, away from you, lay down, stay, those kinds of things that people should do when they don't necessarily need it. So domestic equals restricted, and wild equals free. So a domestic dog should feel restricted at home. And if you want to have some wild behavior, if you want a wild thing in your home, then set your dog free. Go for it, and you'll suffer from that. So it's important to set up a schedule at home to create a feeling of restriction. So you have crates and gates and no roaming. And some people might say, and this brings me to a very, very important point, some people might say, well, then my dog's just going to sit around in one spot all day. And that's not necessarily true, because once a dog becomes restricted and doesn't get to roam the house freely, then you suddenly realize your responsibility in all of this in having to provide activities. You are the provider of activities for your dog. You need to be your dog's guide, or I like to say camp counselor, because people get the idea that, well, they have to be the dog's boss. But it's more like a camp counselor. A camp counselor is kind and sweet and very caring, but they're very responsible. They have a set schedule that they have to keep. They have to keep the kids safe. They have to keep the kids guarded and show them a good time all at the same time. So it's your responsibility to make sure that your dog doesn't become that wild thing that I get most of my calls for.
Wow. Thank you very much, Jeff. If anybody's got any questions on dogs, you can email them to me through our website, Helen Doron Radio.com. Give your website, Jeff.
Great. www.jeffmorgannow.com.
Thanks a lot, Jeff. Speak to you soon.
My pleasure.